for joining me. I'm Scotty D, and this is an old Gibson ES-125 from Kalamazoo. And it's got a little issues with the truss rod. The frets are too small, and some of the electronics need help. So it's a 1956, and it's in pretty darn good shape. But hopefully by the end of the day, or the end of this video, we'll have everything straightened out and she'll be playing like a champ. Let's take a look inside. There's the model number stamp inside of the bass side F-hole. A little harder to read, and it's quite dirty in there, but there it is, the serial number V7743-29 on the treble side F-hole. It's a weird serial number. The truss rod was tightened as much as humanly possible. I mean, I was really surprised when I went in there and loosened it. Got a feel for what was going on there. I already backed it all the way out, flattened out the bottom, lubed it up, and stuck it back in there, getting ready for what's to come next. And it was so tightened that actually the neck started taking a dive downward this way at about the 3rd fret, but then it still had all that excess relief in the middle. And the next thing I wanted to show you is the fret width, which is 65 thousandths. Typically, modern Gibsons are about 95 to over 100 thousandths wide. So 65 thousandths is just a weird narrow wire, almost like a banjo wire that they were doing in the 50s. This is the second. I think actually the other 50s Gibson that I replaced the frets on recently was a 54 Les Paul Jr. But these ones are getting replaced. Because we're replacing them, it's a perfect time to do a little compression. Give that truss rod a little help by straightening out the neck here in this area where there's too much relief. We can do that during a fret job. We can heat it. We can put in the new frets with fish glue. We can bend it back a little bit with clamps and help that truss rod out. That's my main goal with this job, is to get it more playable, but also get the neck straighter where he'll have full control. Next, I plugged it in. We're going to listen to the electronics. When I did it earlier, I could hear that the pots are scratchy. The owner of the guitar already tried to clean it up just by spraying this stuff out here. I've got something that might work a little better. Take this knob off. That's to keep from denting the top. So what I want to do is I want to avoid taking all the pots out, all the electronics out of the guitar by pulling them through the pickup hole. What I have here is a pipette with a little whip tip and a piece of shrink tubing on it. And next I'm going to take the deoxit, which is the electronics cleaner. I'm going to transfer it into a cup. Then I'm going to wick the deoxit up into the pipette. It doesn't take much. I just got a little bit in there. And we'll go clean this pot. I'm not even hearing the scratchiness right now, but anyways, go in here with the deoxit right around the shaft. Just kind of flood it in there and give it a good wiggle. Oh, I heard it. I heard it scratch. It's right at the tail end when it's going to the off position. Right in that area. So if we're lucky, that'll clean it out without having to, completely remove the electronics, which is a pain in the rump roast. Seems to be working. It works like a champ, really. They sell a little attachment that screws right onto your pot. You have to take the nut off. Even that's kind of a pain in the butt. That's the tone there. She's feeding back. A little scratchy. bring it over here to this workstation, which has kind of become my neck straightening station. I've got this microphone boom arm. I'm putting it up above the guitar about 14 inches. And then I'll take my heat lamp, stick it on the boom arm, plug it in where the lamp is about 10 to 12 inches above the wood, the fretboard wood, the rosewood. And we'll start warming this neck up. We're gonna slowly get it to where it's relaxed, and I might even clamp it into straightness before I put the frets in, even before I take the old frets out. Warming it up helps the old frets come out. So let's just start warming it now. Well, this one's warming up. Check out these other Gibsons I have here from the 40s and 50s. This is the 48 LG3. It also has the narrow fret wire, actually 25 thousandths tall, same 65 to 70 thousandths wide. It's getting a refret. Let's look at the even older one. I have one that's a 43. There it is, a 43 LG2. 70 thousandths wide on the fret wire, maybe 71. Yeah, 70. Let's see. Yeah, about 25 tall. 25 thou. Maybe it is ready for a refret also. I didn't think this one needed one, but I guess let's see. We'll do the neck reset on this one and decide. This one needs some bridge work. I'm going to be doing a lot of refrets on old Gibsons. This galvanized sheet metal helps to deflect the heat back up to the bottom of the neck. It gets the whole neck warm, not just the top, but we want the whole neck to warm up. And we'll clamp it and do a slight back bow. Let it cool overnight, come back the next day, we'll pull the frets. Keep checking it for straightness with a notched straight edge. I want this neck really straight by the time I put the new frets in. Our goal is to help out this little old truss rod here. So after heating for 15 minutes, I've got both sides hot. I check the radius with a radius gauge, and it turns out to be about a 9.5 inch radius. So I'm going to take my 9.5 inch radius cauls, put one here by the body joint, and I'll put one here at the 3rd fret, because the fretboard had already taken a dive downward towards the truss rod access hole due to truss rod over tightening. So I don't want to force any more of that nonsense past the 3rd fret. I just want to clamp it right in between these two cauls, which ends up being right about the 9th fret, and see if I can force a slight straightening, if not a little bit of a back bow in that area of the neck. Slowly tightening it till we get straight, if not a slight back bow. I'll just let it cool this way. Come back. So I had to crank down on that clamp a little bit to get it to straighten out like that, but it did straighten. This is doing all the work. The truss rod and the frets are just going to hold it there. Pulling extra narrow fret wire can be a challenge. Sometimes I have to use heat, but I also have to use a 10,000ths of an inch diamond nut file. Create a little groove down there in between the wood and the metal so that the fret pulling tool can get down in there and grab on. Pop it out. The smaller the fret wire, the harder it is to pull it. So I'm going to heat up that neck. I'm going to clamp it up and set it aside for a few days. I'm going to heat up the nut. This is a nylon nut. I'm going to hit it with a hammer. It's backed up behind the nut. Keep it from tearing out. Remove the backer block and pull it on out. They glue them in. Create a chamfer on each fret slot. Just want to soften that top edge. Clean up the board with some maroon Scotch-Brite patch. And clean out each slot with the fret slotting saw. Make sure they're all the right depth. Now we can get installing. I'm going to radius each wire to about a 7 1/4 radius. I've over radiused each piece. Spread the glue around with an X-Acto blade. Clean up the mess. And hammer them in. This first one didn't want to go in. You can just tell. I don't want to force it too much. I want to start over. So we're using that warm fish glue in each fret slot. And we're hammering in each fret. I've barbed the tangs of each fret to a 28 thousandths of an inch. That first fret kind of told me that I needed to do a little something. It wasn't going in. Like I wanted it to anyways. So I modified the tang. Instead of modifying the fretboard wood, I modify the fret and get it to fit in the existing slot. That's what I like to do. Then I check each fret, make sure there's no gap, make sure they're all seated perfectly with a 3/1000 of an inch feeler gauge. Check to see if my excess relief went away, which it did not. So I'm going to get out those 9 1/2 radius cauls and my long beam, and I'm going to clamp a back bow into this neck, and I'm going to let it set aside for 3 days. I've got a place in the other room over here where I can just chill. While I finished the first part of the fret job over here on this workbench that supports the middle of the neck, supporting the fretboard extension is another issue. There's nothing underneath this area. The neck block covers the first 2 frets here, but the problem is hammering frets in over this area. So luckily this guitar has a pickup route for that dog ear P90 pickup, and I'm able to put in an axe jack from Music City Bridge. Here you can see it. And then underneath, there it is, right underneath the jack, we've got these wedges stacked up. So I can hammer as hard as I want. Although I'm not going to have to hammer that hard because I have modified the fret tangs with the fret barber so that they're a little less tangy. They should go in real easy. Let's see. The great thing about the workstation is that it's on a swivel, so you can go from the right side to the left side. And I installed this bracket back here on the wall, and I installed it right into some of the wall studs so that when I swing the frame over there, I can come over here and basically stand on this end and it won't budge. And so with that connected to the wall, this connected to this metal framed bench, the wedges, the jack, I feel much safer hammering frets in over the fretboard extension than I would otherwise on that other bench. It's a little easier cleanup. It's more forgiving, I guess. And I've shortened the length of each fret. I don't leave any overhang because I don't want to get my end clippers or end cutters anywhere near the finish. This is liquid hide glue. The warm pot of water right there. It's not the hot hide glue, but I still warm it up just to get it a little thinner. I moved my supports right under the heel. Now that all the frets are in, another great thing about the workstation is that I can place the trash can right underneath of it, and that'll catch all the fret ends as I clip them off. Now, I'm not in any rush or anything, so I can maybe rather I'd just wait because of the vibrations, you know, and all. I'd just rather let this sit for now. They're all seated just right, but I'd rather let them just kind of like hang out for, I don't know, half a day or so before I start, you know, causing any extra vibrations anywhere, filing any of that stuff. I usually like to do the filing and stuff the next day. Let that glue fully cure. Let them frets marry up with the fretboard real nice. I'll cut off the fret ends with my end cutters. These are the files. I have the magnetic snap file. I have a double cut file on a wooden handle. A diamond grit magnetic snap file. The fret end dressing file. And a triangle file. First I'll use the perpendicular mill file snapped into the magnetic handle. I'll get started on these fret ends. It's perpendicular to the length so it doesn't ride you up over the top of the frets. Once I go over the whole area with that one, I'll hit it with the double cut file. Hone it down a little further, closer to the wood. I've also got this little shorty of a diagonal mill file cut down with a wooden handle for those hard to get areas. Then I'll use the mill file and a galvanized piece of sheet metal along the body to protect it. This is the 35-degree fret bevel file. Make sure that all the frets have a consistent 35-degree bevel to them. I'll take those scratches off with a diamond grit file, loose from the magnetic handle. Then I use a craft stick with 220 grit sandpaper, 320 grit, and 400 grit. It's flexible, so it gets in, hits every fret. This is the fret end dressing file. I'm gonna knock that sharp corner off the bevels and hit that 90-degree edge. Soften it a bit. Now I'll address any high frets that I might have, and I'll use a Sharpie marker to identify which ones are high. Then I'll get those high frets down into the neighborhood with the rest of them with a cant file, double checking until it's level. Once they're all in the same neighborhood, I'll go over the entire fretboard with the double cut file on a wooden handle, create a little fall away if needed over the fretboard extension, and get rid of that neck to body joint hump. Then I'll take 120 grit sandpaper on a fret bar, go the full length of the fretboard. Next I'll get out my fret shield and start crowning the frets with my triangle file. Just need to knock off that sharp corner. Back to the diamond grit file along the length of each fret to get rid of all of the sandpaper scratches and files. Next I'll work on those crowns some more with my scrub block and 220 grit sandpaper, 320 grit. I'll remove the fret shield and do maroon Scotch Brite over the wood and the fret. I'll hit the bevels a little bit with some 400 grit. Back with the fret shield, I'll do 400 grit through 1000 grit. Then I use the gray Scotch Brite pad. Now 1200 grit, 1500 grit, and 2000 grit. Last, 4/0 steel wool. Then I'll remove the fret shield, I'll vacuum it up, and I'll use a naphtha on a paper towel to clean up the fretboard. So on these refrets, when I get to the stage where I would normally put the lemon oil on, what I do is I come in and inspect the edge of the fretboard, and right there I can see that I can fill in a little space under the fret. So I want to do this little process first before I oil the fretboard. It's just that one. And there, it's real easy. I just take a little finish touch-up stick and jam it in there, and then I go over top of it with the a little shellac on one of those little foam Q-tips. I go down the entire length of the fretboard with the shellac, and it kind of puts a shiny finish on there. And then I can polish the very ends of the frets with the micro mesh and get them really nice and shiny, and then she's ready to go. I'm impressed by the amount of low mids coming out of that little Champion amp. Anyways, the volume knobs all cleaned up, nice. Volume and tone, no scratchy. Maybe a little scratchy on the tone. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I hope to see y'all soon. Catch you later.